Many of you might notice that I am a white woman. I was born to white parents, grew up and married a white man. And today I'm here to talk to you about being white and how I came of age understanding what it means to be part of the white race. White is a word sometimes that makes people feel uncomfortable, so if you feel any discomfort with that word, just check in with yourselves. Words in our culture such as Nazis, slavery, Japanese internment camps can all cause some visceral responses in us because of the historical context. Sometimes white can be one of those words, as can black. And I would encourage you to get comfortable with the word white, as I'm going to be adding the word privilege. Now, privilege is a unique social construct. Some privileges we earn. I, for instance, earned a college degree, a license to practice that degree, and a job. I did not earn the privileges of a heart surgeon, so I don't get the perks of being a doctor. I didn't, however, earn being white because I'm genetically white and was born white. And so being white sometimes means you have a better opportunity of getting a job. Maybe you're served quicker in a restaurant. Maybe you're treated with more respect just shopping. So there are perks that we have as white people that we don't always really notice. I was raised in North Louisiana, in central Louisiana. We call it the Sin Law. I had a great childhood catching fireflies, catching crawdads in the front ditch, climbing trees. We even rode four-wheelers through the swamps in the backyard. It was really a great place to be. And I came out here when I was about 19 years of age. Once I came to Idaho, I began to learn things about myself. I thought I was very objective and open-minded when I lived in Louisiana, but slowly I would pick up on words and attitudes that had been handed down to me that I was not aware of. So I'm 19 years old, and we're having some friends over to have a little party, and we decided we're going to put on some music. And I say, "Hey, y'all, anybody got any of that nigga jam?" And the room got really quiet, and then someone said, "What did you say?" And it was in that moment, I guess, that I realized I had used the term nigger. I would have never used that term in any other way. And I was pretty ashamed because the rap culture in the 80s, for the white kids like me, was referred to as nigger jam. And we discussed this in front of the African American students I went to school with. So I was pretty embarrassed, Like, where did that come from for me? And I began to feel guilty, noticing other things in my language or behaviors. But what I eventually figured out was the guilt was just as bad as the not knowing, because guilt has a way of leading to shame, and shame shuts us down. When we shut down from shame, there's no conversation. We become defensive and easily offended. It would be a little while later that I would be sharing another story about an African American community where I grew up, which was literally right across the tracks like you see in the old movies. And I would refer to this neighborhood in my story as the quarters. And again, in conversation with someone, this individual looks at me and says, "What did you say?" I said, "Oh, the quarters, that's what we call them. That's the black neighborhoods." And this person said, "Isn't that racist?" And so, like in that moment, once again, clarity, I said, "Oh my gosh, that is a racist term, because quarters is the name given to the slave residents during the times of slavery. So if you ever visit a plantation home, the quarters are what they refer to as where the slaves were kept." And so what I realized was this was an offensive term that was used to keep the black man oppressed through language. And this time I wasn't mad at myself. I was really upset with the culture I grew up in because I was ashamed. I'm like, why didn't we know better? Like, why wasn't I taught better? You see, we have this theory in our country. It's called all men are created equally. And every now and then we get it out, kick it around, dust it off. But I don't know that we really have ever figured out what that means. So it's been my experience as an advocate and social worker that there are typically 4 types of responses by privileged people towards inequality. The first is the people who get that there's inequality. They see there's a problem. And so they try to engage as best they can, having conversations. They're the person in the room that says, "What did you say?" and then goes further to help you grow as a person. The second is people who get inequality but don't really say anything or do anything about it. So in private conversations, they might have an agreement. "Oh yeah, you're right, there's too many black guys in prison, something's going on." But that's as far as it goes because it's sort of a hidden behavior. The third is the white is right. We are a European country and we are the dominant race. We are the majority. It's our religion that established this country, and by golly, we're going to stay that way. The fourth response from privileged people, the one that often blows my mind, is privilege? What privilege? I don't have any privilege. So, a story to narrate these types of privileged responses is another story from my hometown. I grew up in a city that was predominantly African American. My high school was 60% black. However, the entire town was run by white folks. We ran the grocery stores. Those were the people in office, judges, police officers. I think there were a couple African American officers. We ran the public library. But really, there was not a representation or a cross-section of the African American community. So the church I went to, I was raised in, was a socio-political center for our community. And when people ran for office, they really were introduced by my pastor to the entire congregation. They would come to our church because it was a large, privileged church, and meet our congregation. Didn't matter if they were Lutheran or Methodist or where they had come from. And as they would come, the pastor would introduce them, and all by name. But other new members weren't introduced like this. So to give you an idea of sort of the dynamics of Winfield, the city I grew up in, and this church home that I went to, we had a taxi cab driver from New Orleans. He was a white man who came to our part of the state, and with him he brought his black wife. Now this cab driver and his black wife decided to attend our church. And they didn't do it once, they did it twice. Well, this was very upsetting to the leadership of the church. And so the church then held a meeting with the deacons and other administrative people. And the vote kind of went down like this. 3 people abstained from voting, didn't want to get involved. 2 people said, this is a white church and she can go find a black church. 2 people said, well, I don't know, I don't think that that's what church is really about, colors. And eventually one person would become very passionate about the belief that it wasn't okay for this African American woman to be asked to leave our church, and would persuade others to vote on their side. So the question to me has always been, if that had been an African American cab driver and his African American wife, would that vote have been any different? I think that it might have. So what I've learned, though, over time is that these things that I experienced, which were significant to the South, personal, awareness of racism, societal awareness of societal racism, and then awareness of institutionalized racism, which was my church home. It doesn't really differ just because it's in the South. After living here for some time, I decided to attend the College of Southern Idaho, and it was in a health class. We had been given an assignment to present on a topic and to present both for and against the topic. One gentleman stands up in my class. This is about, a class full of 35 students. Most of us were white people. And he says, "Did you guys hear about that James Byrd Jr. guy that got drugged to death behind that truck in Jasper, Texas? You know, the 3 guys that drug him to his death?" "Yes." "Well, now they want to do hate crime laws. Do you guys believe in hate crime laws?" "I don't believe in hate crime laws." And of course, I rose my hand. And there, as I scanned the room, I realized I was the only one raising my hand. And so then I sort of involuntarily came to my feet and tried to share simply my understanding and experience of the hatred and racism in the South that's on both sides of the fence, and that there isn't a group that does oppress the other group, and that this has to be addressed. A man being drugged to his death behind a pickup truck in the mid-1990s is an echo of everything that happened in the 1960s, 50s, and throughout our country's history with African American people. So oftentimes, I find when I try to talk about Black Lives Matter or issues affecting African American people, while there is a ton of research that supports how they've been treated throughout their history in our country, and we know that there's still research showing that they are targeted by police and are being imprisoned at a higher rate, we just never seem to want to, or don't know sometimes, I guess, how to break out of that and to make a different choice for ourselves. So there are 5 things that I have done as an individual to learn and to become better at understanding other cultures, and the African American people, of course, were close to my heart because of my childhood. And these 5 things I would encourage you to do. 1 is study. Study, study, study. Read books, watch movies, have conversations with people, take a college class. Go visit parts of the country you have never been to. Read the newspapers to local areas where these crimes are happening. Watch TED Talks about inequality. Second, I would encourage you to question everything. Question what you read, question how you feel about it, question what you can do to help other people, question why things are happening. Be curious, naturally curious. Thirdly, you have to drop the self-righteousness. This is a country that's 67% white. We in Idaho live in the 3rd whitest state in the country, and these things are still happening in our country. Idaho isn't its own independent place. We're all interconnected in America. And the things that hurt our communities around the country also hurt us. You know, one of my big concerns is the amount of enemies that we sometimes as white people earn ourselves by either failure to protect, failure to act, or just not caring. So, fourthly, vote with your dollar. Put your money into the businesses and the organizations that you know support those who may be victims of inequality. Equality does not equal your oppression. I think that's often a fear. What do I have to give up to help someone get somewhere in life, or just to be treated equal? Well, the truth is you don't have to give up anything. You just have to be an advocate to the system and to others in your community to say, we got to be nicer about this. We've got to do this different. And then lastly, be brave. Because when you reach out and try to do things that maybe aren't popular amongst your peers, and are in that category of people who are saying, boy, inequality is wrong, oftentimes when you start to make a stance thinking they think that as well, they kind of disappear. So you have to be brave, confident in who you are, decide what you can and can't do, join groups, because there's lots of groups in our country that are pushing forward in different areas, whatever you're compassionate about. But I think as the majority, it's time we stepped up to take care of the minority in our country. That's what we do as human beings in family systems, on our jobs. It's a core American value. So anyway, now that I've shared with you my thoughts, what are you going to do?